Travel along, Catholic pilgrims, as we learn from St. Augustine, Doctor of the Church, while we read his book, Confessions. Hello, Catholic pilgrims. Welcome to our reading from Book 3, Chapter 3. Before we begin, I want to define a name that St. Augustine is going to use. He is going to call a group of people the wreckers. According to information on the internet, the wreckers were, quote, a group of rowdy, mischievous fellow students at Carthage who enjoyed harassing strangers and making fun of people for amusement, representing Augustine's youthful, rebellious spirit and desire for belonging, even when he found their actions coarse. They weren't necessarily criminals, but a gang of ruffians, the frat boys of their time, who reveled in breaking social norms and were both a source of shame and attraction for the young Augustine, unquote. So I just wanted to clear that up before we begin so that things make more sense. Let's hear about the wreckers by turning to page 57. Yet all the while, far above, your mercy hovered faithfully about me. I exhausted myself in depravity and the pursuit of an unholy curiosity. I deserted you and sank to the bottommost depths of skepticism and the mockery of devil worship. My sins were a sacrifice to the devil, and for all of them you chastised me. I defied you even so far as to relish the thought of lust and gratify it too, within the walls of your church during the celebration of your mysteries. For such a deed I deserved to pluck the fruit of death, and you punished me for it with a heavy lash. But compared with my guilt, the penalty was nothing. How infinite is your mercy, my God! You are my refuge from the terrible dangers amongst which I wandered head on high, intent upon withdrawing still further from you. I loved my own way, not yours, but it was a truant's freedom that I loved. Besides these pursuits, I was also studying for the law. Such ambition was held to be honorable, and I determined to succeed in it. The more unscrupulous I was, the greater my reputation was likely to be, for men are so blind that they even take pride in their blindness. By now, I was at the top of the school of rhetoric. I was pleased with my superior status and swollen with conceit. All the same, as you well know, Lord, I behaved far more quietly than the wreckers, a title of ferocious devilry, which the fashionable set chose for themselves. I had nothing whatever to do with their outbursts of violence, but I lived amongst them, feeling a perverse sense of shame because I was not like them. I kept company with them, and there were times when I found their friendship a pleasure, but I always had a horror of what they did when they lived up to their name. Without provocation, they would set upon some timid newcomer, gratuitously affronting his sense of decency for their own amusement and using it as fodder for their spiteful jests. This was the devil's own behavior, or not far different. Wreckers was a fit name for them, for they were already adrift and total wrecks themselves. The mockery and trickery which they loved to practice on others was a secret snare of the devil, by which they were mocked and tricked themselves. When we were stationed in Alabama, my husband and I had a family-friendly Halloween party at our house, and when it was over, one of the guys my husband went to Air War College with stayed behind to help us clean up. And I told him that he didn't need to help, but he said, "Oh, well, my Catholic guilt says I have to." He was half joking, half not. Now, I had no idea before this that he was Catholic. He never talked about it at all. I'm sure he was a cradle Catholic that fell away from his faith, and I'm betting one of the reasons he did was because he didn't like feeling guilty over different things that he did in his life. There are only certain things that our culture wants you to feel guilt or shame over, and they all have an ism at the end or the suffix phobia. Anything else, including the 7 deadly sins, we should never feel any guilt or shame over. Now, guilt and shame are not dirty words, and I don't care what the popular culture tells us about them. They are feelings that warn us of bad behavior, sinful behavior. We should feel guilty if we cheat, steal, lie, or commit a sexual sin. We should feel shame if we do something gravely awful. Child abusers should feel ashamed of themselves. If we blaspheme God, we should feel ashamed because it is awful and terribly wrong. These feelings are like warning signals going off, telling us that we need to stop doing what we are doing. People who have a weak conscience or an ill-formed one may not feel guilt or shame, and they go on to do horrific things. We see here today with St. Augustine that he enjoys hanging out with the wreckers, but he also knows that deep down, what they are doing isn't right. He wants to belong, but we can see that he is having a bit of an internal struggle with their activities. That guilt and shame that he feels should have alerted him to move on to better people. That was hard for him to do because the desire to be with the cool crowd was greater. So, back to the guy that was at my house talking about his Catholic guilt. He just misunderstands what he's feeling. He would have felt bad for just walking away out of the house and leaving us to clean up all by ourselves, so he was moved to help us. It's good to help people. We should feel guilty if we just constantly walk away, leaving others to do everything while we do nothing. If nothing else, we should offer help and let them decline it. Now, obviously, we don't want people walking around with the heavy burden of shame and guilt, and that's why we need to go to confession if we've done something wrong. And then, once it has been confessed and absolved, we can shed that guilt and move on, committed to not doing that sin again. So we will stop here for today, Catholic Pilgrims. Meet me back here soon, and until then, live the faith boldly and travel well.